In the boundless expanse of our digital savanna, where data streams meander through the landscape and cyber predators lurk in the underbrush, a pioneering evolution unfolds at the crossroads of artificial intelligence and threat intelligence. On this auspicious day, March 15th, Atomics on a Friday, takes immense pride in welcoming Harrison Van Ripper, a beacon of innovation in this ever-evolving domain, alongside your devoted co-hosts, Michael Haag and Paul Michaud. As dawn breaks on this new horizon in cybersecurity, where AI does more than just complement, it powers our stride against the myriad threats that endanger our digital ecosystems. Let us set forth with Harrison Van Ripper. Guided by the cutting-edge insights from zero-shot security and bolstered by the keen perspectives of Michael and Paul, we are poised to redefine the essence of threat intelligence. So, join us today for an enlightening journey into the core of AI-enhanced cybersecurity, promising not merely insights, but a significant leap forward into a future where our digital defenses are swift, robust, and ever vigilant, all here on Atomics on a Friday.
Happy Friday. Happy Atomics on a Friday.
What an intro. Also, just realizing the misspellings at the bottom of the image of random words, intelligence, atomic.
Cyber contigrity.
Yeah. The intern is getting lazy these days.
Hey, he's like doubling. I mean, he's making intros now. Like, there's a lot going on.
I mean, we pay him good money for these. Like, I expect quality.
Yes, it was auspicious on this auspicious day.
It sounded like there's two different people joining us. We had two different pronunciations of the name.
Oh, nobody's gonna take this thing seriously.
I hope nobody actually has. No, I'm just kidding.
That's great. Oh, that's good. Well, welcome to Purple March Madness, where we talk about AI and threat intelligence on this auspicious March 15th. Is it? Yeah, it is the 15th. If you have yet to keep pace with all of the March happenings, you'll realize that the NCAA technically does not start March Madness until, I don't know, like next week or something. But so we got ahead of them. Thank you.
Which is good because I don't know how to do date and times right. So I have to fix the bracket again.
Oh, yes. Right,
it's done. Like the bracket's all done. I just need to configure the date and times, which are still wrong after fixing them a third time. So once March Madness actually starts, we'll drop it. That gives me time to actually make sure and have somebody review the dates on them.
When does it start? I'm pretty sure it's like the 18th or something. Oh, yeah, the 19th. And it goes till middle of April. So we're ahead of our time. But hey, that's why we're here. Purple March Madness. We, if you remember from last year, we had a bunch of people on and we talked about the Goots and we broke down our Goots report and whatnot. So, oh yeah, that's what Purple Madness is where we bring in different backgrounds, perspectives. And this year we took a different turn. Kind of but we kind of looked at it from like, hey, let's have each person kind of talk about like a little bit of their specialty. So there's a lot of cool stuff going on. And then if you were here at the beginning, March 1st, we had Jamie, Naz, and Jose on talking about data source diversity. Naz was here last week talking about the detection journey, which was amazing. And then this week, Harrison, good sir, I'll bring you in. Howdy. Thank you for joining again.
Behind the stage curtain, just
yes,
just waiting for the cue.
Yeah.
Lights.
Yeah,
camera.
Exactly. Yeah. Whereas I need like a specific designated intro, like walk-in song. Yeah.
Hey, background logo.
Signature series. That would be so good. That would be so good. We should do intro music for each person.
That'd be good. Hey, how goes it?
good to
Yeah,
see.
it just AI isn't quite there yet. Obviously, they got my name wrong, but it's Van Riper, just for the AIs that are listening right now. So
Not Van Ripper.
no, unfortunately not. Yeah.
We have, well, technically there should be a second guest because of the mispronunciation, but I guess we'll settle with whoever
Well,
you
I
are.
told you she's sitting. My co-employee is sitting taking a nap right now. So
Very studious.
yeah, so she's back there.
Keep him busy.
Yeah.
That's exciting. Well, yeah, so if this is your first Purple Madness, welcome. I'm Mike, a host here and threat researcher at Splunk. You might know me from such projects as Living Off the Land Drivers and Atomic Red Team. And yeah, that's where I'm at.
I'm Paul. I'm a senior threat hunter at Unit 42 on the managed threat hunting team, formerly at Red Canary, previously Atomic Red Team maintainer, and previously Twitter shit poster.
Previously,
I am reformed.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm also just not noticing why don't y'all have beard hay photos?
Historical
Just
Yeah,
accuracy.
I got it.
Yes.
So I'm Harrison Van Riper. I've been in cybersecurity for about 8 years now, I guess. Been kind of all over the place. Vendors. I was at Red Canary with Paul. I was at Digital Shadows, now ReliaQuest, back in 2016 to 2020, and then I was at MITRE after that. In between Red Canary and Digital Shadows, and now I started my own company after Red Canary called Zero Shot Security, basically focusing on sort of like the intersection of AI and cybersecurity, but basically trying to bring kind of this like modern technology into the cybersecurity space, kind of riding this wave of AI, this new wave of AI, since AI is not new, obviously, but yeah, trying to apply that directly to cybersecurity and see how it can help out there. So yeah.
Right on. What's next?
Awkward silence. Let's ride the silence, man.
Oh yeah,
that was weird.
We'll get into the demo shortly. Oh, there's Mike. Mike's back.
Yeah, that was odd. My connection was unstable.
Okay, there we go.
Sorry. Ride the silence.
Well, before we get into the
only slide that we don't have.
Yeah, the demo we have, I feel like there's some questions that maybe people have about AI, especially regarding threat intelligence.
Yep.
And especially for somebody like me who doesn't dabble in the AI as much yet, is kind of getting started with like the chat GPTs of the world, etc. A lot of buzz around AI in threats, in breaches and incidents that we're seeing, the rise of it all. Like, break that down for us. Like, what does it really mean? How can we potentially identify it or kind of understand the perspective that we're kind of seeing from this rise of AI in incidents and breaches, etc.?
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting, right? I think like a lot of it, I mean, to be completely frank, I think a lot of it is a little bit of marketing. I mean, and it always kind of is. I mean, there's always a little bit of that thrown in there. I think the kind of the biggest stuff that I've seen so far in terms of like threats using artificial intelligence, large language models specifically, since that's kind of like my area, is really like content generation. So, kind of apply that to a lot of different things. Spear phishing emails. It could be like a phishing page. There's a lot of different tools out there that are sparking up that kind of, well, like the coding aspect of large language models, right? So like that's been kind of like baked into a bunch of different things, and having an easy, quick, and reproducible way to create convincing phishing pages, like I think is a pretty solid use of that for an attacker. I think that like that's definitely one thing, and it's hard to really identify like separate that out from just normal phishing pages, right? Because I mean, if you think about it, all those large language models are trained on things that are already in existence. So you're technically not going to see something that's like brand new. I mean, like probably in a few years or something when we get some more advanced models, then you probably will. But a lot of it is, kind of like historical data. So yeah. So anyways, like it's hard to really parse out what is something AI generated and what isn't. And I think that that's, when you talk about like images and like stuff like that, like obviously that's a big thing with determining deep fakes and like all that stuff. But yeah, I mean, I think honestly, the list can kind of go on and on. Anything that you can think of where you have to write a piece of code or draft something up, large language models can do. Whether or not it's good is kind of like a different story. And whether or not it can run, on first pass is a different story. So, all those caveats aside, it can do all those things. Like, yeah, sure, an LLM could write malware. Like, it can. Is it good? Is it going to work properly? Probably not. But if you tweak it around a little bit, it lowers that barrier to entry, which I think is something that we've talked about in security for a long time about lowering barriers to entry. I think it does do that because I think it can enable more people in general to learn more about different topics, whether or not that's a good topic or a malicious topic. I mean, that's, you can't really distinguish between that when you're developing a model like that. So anyways, sort of a long intro to all that, but yeah, I mean, there's a whole lot kind of to dive into it. So I can jump into kind of anywhere around there.
Yeah, so I guess like a follow-up would be, what is the threat that people should be cautious of or paying attention to with the idea of AI being incorporated into it? Because obviously there's some things that you just can't action, right? Like, do you know if this piece of code inside of this piece of malware was AI generated, and is it relevant? Like, what's your take on that aspect of like from a defensive standpoint?
Yeah, I mean, I think right now, from what I've seen, anyways, I think now I'm gonna misremember this, but I think that there was a news story like last week or the week before about like some new AI worm or something like that, and I think after it like came out and it kind of got some hype, I think a lot of people were like, yeah, this doesn't really mean anything, and I don't even think this is real, kind of thing, and I think that's the point where we're at right now. I think there's a lot of like, I mean, FUD, I mean, to use a term that we use a lot, around the potential capabilities of what an AI means in a cyber threat, kind of landscape. Like I said, though, like, again, these LLMs, sure, at least like the code writing ones, sure, they can write software. Like they can do that. It's not necessarily very good all the time. Some of it is, some of it's not. But if you have somebody who is actively using it to, maybe better a piece of malware, like to enhance it or like add capabilities or, maybe find different ways to evade defenses by or something like that, like evade some sort of EDR technology or something like that, then like potentially, again, lowering those barriers to entry, potentially that can cause some concern. But honestly, I think right now, like where we're at right now is not necessarily in terms of like threats that we've actually seen incorporating AI and stuff like that. There's not a ton of them. Now, not to say that like maybe it's just a reporting bias. Like maybe we just don't know what's being kind of like produced from an AI that's being out there. Again, if you write a phishing page, how can you tell the difference between something that's been written by AI and something that isn't? And does it matter? I mean, like to get back to what you're saying, like it really kind of doesn't matter at that point, right? Like the phishing page is there, regardless of however it got put out there. It's there, and like somebody is collecting information off of it. So like regardless of an AI. If an AI did it, I mean, so what? Like, you should be concerned about the page, not who did it at that point.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And now, one interesting thing you said, which was understanding what they're using to put into a prompt. And I think it was maybe 3 weeks ago, Microsoft released a report on adversaries, I think from North Korea, using OpenAI to find some novelty. Like, do you remember reading anything about that, or like kind of like the high level gist of how they identified like that activity? Because obviously that came from the back end side, which isn't just open to you or I.
Right. Yeah. So I do remember that. And that was my question as well. Was kind of like, how are you kind of like making that that connection between the two? And I'm sure that they're doing something behind the scenes. To be honest, I didn't read it totally in depth, but so they may have explained it in that article. But as a threat intel person, you know, like obviously Microsoft has incredible visibility into those kinds of things. Microsoft obviously has a very deep partnership with OpenAI. It's not a stretch to say that those teams are working together and they can, you know, corroborate the different indicators and, you know, behavior patterns and all that. It is interesting though to see that, like, I think that was kind of one of the first times that I really seen like here's a definitive threat intel group that we track in Microsoft, you know, kind of separately. We've seen a shift now to using a platform, you know, that is AI, you know, focused. Again, if I remember right, the things that they were doing in there were not, they were like, it wasn't something crazy. They were like asking questions about like how to improve malware, I think, or like how to improve phishing pages, if I'm remembering it correctly. But again, it was like things that you or I might ask ChatGPT to do, like to help out for, you know, anything else. Like, hey, you know, this section of code is broken, or it's not working the way that I want it to, or, you know, I want to tweak it to do this. How can I do that? That seems to be kind of the way that they were using it, which again, how do you prevent against that? That's up to OpenAI and, like, you know, how you actually implement those systems, which I think is a whole other kind of like topic of discussion, the difference between what the LLM actually does and how you release and kind of like put an LLM out into the world, like what OpenAI is doing. There's whole systems around like monitoring and, you know, protecting the LLM, but then there's also just the raw LLM that's in the back end that, you know, if you ask it something, it will do something. So, yeah, I mean, I think that's kind of where that was an interesting report. I think it's kind of the first, if I'm not mistaken, one of the first ones that really come out to really corroborate the two different sides of that.
Do you think that, so like just kind of re-seeing this Microsoft report, do you think that AI, say even ChatGPT, will move things forward for adversaries? I know, like, even from today, maybe the future, but like today, is it moving them forward and being better at what they do? Or is it just like lowering the entry to get those tier 1 people to write better crap?
That's a good question. I think the second one, I think, yes, for sure. And I think that it helps, again, not just adversaries, right? It's going to help a bunch of people. That's why, you know, 100 million people are signed up for ChatGPT. I think if you know what you're doing and you're using those LLM systems in a way to improve the things that you've written, like, again, like I was saying before, you have a piece of code, and again, just using kind of like the attacker mindset, right? I have an implant that I've been using for, you know, X period of time. It is now starting to get caught by EDR or whatever, and I want to avoid that. If you're using an LLM, maybe not ChatGPT, because they probably have systems in place to kind of prevent against that. But if you're using some of these more advanced LLMs that can understand code and understand sort of like that background, yeah, I mean, you can pose kind of like enhancement questions to it to be like, hey, here's this kind of code. This is the kind of thing that I'm wanting it to do. This is what I'm wanting it not to do. How would you suggest to improve that, or give me ideas? Maybe you don't even say write the code for me, but you just say, hey, give me some ideas about how to restructure this, or different tools to use or implement, or use it in a different way, kind of thing. I do think that is, if it's not here, if people aren't using that now, I think that they will. And again, I think it's more about how those chat systems, again, if you're using ChatGPT, how those are being, I don't want to say deployed into the world, but like, I guess that's the way to say it, deployed into the world, but also how they're protected, right? Like you have to build those systems kind of around it. It's not really the LLM's job to necessarily, distinguish between what's good or bad, or, quote unquote, good or bad. That's more of like the systems that you put around it. So yeah, I mean, it's an interesting area. I think like, I can't remember a different point in time. Well, I mean, and this is kind of hyperbole a little bit, but like this LLMs and this recent rise in a new fascination with AI has really changed a whole lot of different areas. And I think that that's all still being kind of sussed out a little bit. I think like, it's kind of like this was a big rock that was just thrown into like the pond, and it's just like rippling out in a bunch of different ways that we don't fully know exactly where it's going to end up. I think some things are definitely changing right now. Some things are probably going to change in a couple years. Some things are probably going to change in 10 years. I think like that's definitely one of those things where if you just look at like the base capabilities that we have right now, 10 years from now, it's going to be much better. Like it's going to be much, much better. And so that's why I say, like, if they're not doing it already, then they definitely will be in the short to medium, term future.
Totally. Yeah.
And that kind of brings us to the defensive side. Like, how can we as practitioners utilize AI to help augment us? Now, I don't think that AI will take our jobs as threat hunters and researchers. I just don't see that, regardless of whatever hype train people will tell you. I don't see it. But it doesn't mean that it can't be a tool in our tool belt, just like anything else, to help us more effective at our jobs. So like, how can we utilize, like, what, obviously, like, this is a problem you're trying to solve of using AI and LLMs. Like,
Yeah.
What's your take on it? Like, what's your perspective of how we can do it?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think there's a lot of different ways, right? I think, again, this is one of those things where we're just kind of scratching the surface of it. I'll say, just to start off, from my perspective, I focused on a very specific task and trying to basically automate that task. So that's kind of how I started out doing what my product is now. And just to give a brief overview of the product, basically, and I'm not going to be salesy on this, I promise. But like, basically what I've done is created a way to automatically map threat reports, like blogs or things like that, to MITRE ATT&CK. So that was something that, like, find the techniques that are within all the different reports and all that. That's something that I've done throughout my entire career. So like, whether I was at Digital Shadows, obviously at MITRE, I was on the attack team and doing that there. But then also at Red Canary, like that's just been a core part of something that I've done this whole time. So I'm like, man, wouldn't it be great if we could like find a way to automate that? I mean, and it started out as like, keyword automation, like, okay, PowerShell's in a sentence. So, all right, that's probably going to be T1059 dot whatever. So like, yeah, that's all great. But then like once AI and LLMs like really took off with ChatGPT, you kind of start to see this whole other kind of perspective of it, of like, okay, we can kind of go deeper into like understanding what the sentence is saying, or what a paragraph is saying. And then basically like assign a label to it, right? And like, again, ML or machine learning and AI, those kinds of models have been around for a while, like classification models, multi-label classification. Like that's been a thing for a long time. They also rely on having a lot of labeled data in order to do that, reliably for a long time. What I think was so interesting about LLMs was that, or at least with these big ones like GPT-3 and 3.5 and 4 and all that, is that you needed relatively little training data in order to get high accuracy labeling. So like, again, for this specific task of labeling sentences, paragraphs to the MITRE ATT&CK framework, you didn't need a ton of like example data to basically have the model tell you, or make a decision as to what technique that it probably is. So so essentially, that's kind of what I've automated in sort of the product that I have now. So again, going back to the question of like, what are the use cases for it? I think that is one, right? Like that is one, obviously a niche, kind of like threat intel focused specific use case. Beyond that, kind of what I've seen so far is, like copilots, right? Like different chat. I don't want to say chatbots, because kind of chatbots, I don't know, it kind of reduces it a little bit. I think because I think that they are a little bit more advanced than like what you typically think of as a chatbot. But like these copilots, right? Of like, I've seen like Recorded Future has one for their threat intel focused stuff. Obviously, Microsoft has the security copilot, which is I think going into GA in April. I think. I think they just announced that. So yeah, so you got the security copilot. You've got, I'm trying to think what else. Oh, CrowdStrike has their Charlotte AI. So again, those are all going to be like kind of copilot-like things where they're sort of like interacting with the company's proprietary either product or their proprietary data. Kind of this things that like it's enhancing their product, right? And I think that's great. Like I think that's definitely the first step. And I think like what kind of gets lost is that like, okay, that stuff starts coming out, and then that's what people think is the entire like idea, like that's it, like that's the end state of LLMs and usage of it. And I really don't think so. I think that this is just kind of the first step in that. And I think having a natural way to, which one of the reasons why I like Security Copilot, or at least the idea of it, having a natural way to, let's say, create a KQL query without having to dig through documentations and like, do all that, I think it's great. Like, I think that's a great use of that. Now, again, I don't think that this will ever replace like a threat hunter or a detection engineer or something like that. But like, let's say a new blog post came out about some new vulnerability, right, that's being exploited. And, y'all are detection engineer type, threat hunter focused type people. So like, I want to go determine if that's in my environment, or like, I want to do a proactive hunt, or I want to create a rule for it. Wouldn't it be great if you had something that would just maybe give you a couple leads of like where to look, or like give you a couple queries about where to go to, right? To just like start off. I think that that's like one really good area in terms of like having a kind of like dedicated assistant kind of like with you along the way, which is why like the whole Copilot, meme is like, that's what everything is called now, is a Copilot. But yeah, so that's obviously kind of like the bigger use case of it right now. I think like in the, I don't know, over the next year, 2 years, I mean, with that, this is one of the areas where I'm really focused on right now, to be frank, is like, what are the use cases for solving cybersecurity tasks that people do every day as a practitioner, as a defender? What are those things that we can take off your plate, kind of thing, like that? And again, like the MITRE ATT&CK mapping stuff is like one of those where it's like, yeah, it's not perfect. And I mean, like, I'll freely admit that it's not perfect, but it's better in my opinion, it's better to have a starting point and have a pretty good starting point to get you maybe 85% of the way there, maybe 90% of the way there. And have you be like, yeah, that one looks pretty accurate. Okay, maybe that mapping doesn't look right. So maybe we'll take that one out. Like, I think that's a pretty good starting place. And I think, from here, it's only going to get better. So yeah, so those are kind of like the two main kind of areas, but I'm interested actually to see what y'all think about that, because y'all are, I mean, I guess I still kind of consider myself a practitioner since that's been like where I've been for my whole career, but like y'all are obviously in the trenches. So like, where are areas that you think, as y'all are thinking about AI right now, where are areas that you think that it could kind of like help out?
Like two things are code, right? Like the snippets. And then to your point about KQLs, like query building. Dude, I have hundreds of queries written. I forget some of them and forget they even existed. But like the ability to say like, oh yeah, give me a query to identify file activity for this particular file type from this particular process, right? Like you get the threat report and says, well, you're looking for these things, and you can just say, hey, give me these things, right? Even if it's 85%, 30 seconds earlier, you were at 0%. So I think things like that are, again, the efficiency aspects. Is it going to be perfect? Probably not. Does it probably need some tweaks? Sure. But again, like, what's faster? Asking it to give me something that's going to need minimal effort, or something of taking time to go find that particular query or write it by hand, like, depending on how complex it has to get. That's like at least how I think about it, and like testing with current things.
Yeah, those two are really good. Something that I've used it for is summary of blogs and things like that. I do like the ability to be able to give like ChatGPT a large blog, 15-minute read, and say pull out indicators. Give me the URL, the path, the method, all the HTTP type kind of blog, or any kind of endpoint indicators. I'll just have it extract all that for me. Very much my, if Nas is listening, that's very much my smash and grab tool now. I just let GPT go handle it at this point, and give me what I need to go look at. And if there's something that looks weird, I'll go and like obviously go read it and validate it. I do love it from that perspective. And something that I really like with Chat GPT kind of in general is it takes away the guesswork as a defender of learning something new. And I don't have to go to Hack Overflow anymore. If I want to get something answered, I don't have to deal with Google's 25 pages digging deep in dark forums for random crap that is not pertinent to what I want to do. I can actually I could even give it like a Splunk doc, a PDF of like commands in Splunk, and ask like, hey, how do I use SPath, or how do I use this random thing? And it can break it out for me. It may not work the first try, but at least I can iterate, and then boom, I have this super crazy, sexy query that's awesome. And I've learned, I had a coworker, Adam, he's really into this stuff. And I learned a lot from him, which in turn helped me learn a little bit about LLMs in general. So I was really like, we wrote or I didn't write anything really, but I just kind of piggybacked on his learnings of vector, chroma DB, and just different things like that, and just understanding how these things work. And it was just super cool, but if it wasn't for something like that, I'm not going to go to Chroma's website and read their docs. That's the last thing I have patience for. And, or download some random thing and it's supposed to help me, learn how to use Chroma or whatever, So I think that's kind of one of the neat features of it all. And, getting up to speed and up to pace on things real fast, writing queries, or, giving it context and having it help you. And I think that stuff is amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think again, like I was saying earlier, I don't know about traditional, maybe traditional is not the right word, but ML stuff in the past, you've had a bunch of different models or different ways to accomplish specific tasks, right? So again, that classification labeling task. now these LLMs are like taking that and being like, all right, this is like a one-stop shop sort of thing. Like you can do anything, or not anything, obviously, but you can do a lot of different things with just this one really gigantic model. And I think like that's what like has impressed a lot of people. So like you say, like the indicator extraction, right? Like, yeah, you could like, obviously there's Python packages and like things like that where you can pull out IP addresses and, domains and like stuff like that. Great. And those have been around for a long time, and there's nothing wrong with those. But in my mind, I mean, because you hit on kind of, I've been into like OSINT scraping and, all that for a long time. So one of the things that I thought was really cool, or just like kind of going down a path of like, what are things that you could do, OSINT, AI, CTI kind of mixture, is doing something like that, where you have like a pipeline where you're basically like scraping. So you're scraping blogs, but then you're doing it. The post processing on that is going into the LLM and then asking it things that you can't really write like a Python package for. So you're like, hey, I want to extract the detection queries that are like written in here. Like Red Canary obviously puts out a lot of stuff that has detection opportunities that have like, kind of like pseudocode sort of like stuff in there. Like, yeah, like pull those out for me. I could try and write like a package for that or something, but it's probably not going to be very good. And like, I can do this like today. Right. So, or even things like I would do for some of the stuff that I've done for the MITRE ATT&CK stuff is like you take a blog and then you say, all right, I have a program that will read this whole thing and like map as much as possible to every single sentence in there. Great. But obviously every single sentence in a blog, especially a longer one, or I mean, any blog, is every single sentence is not going to be threat behavior focused, right? It's not going to be something that can be mapped to MITRE. So, all right, let's, pre-process that, where it's like you ask the LLM, hey, or prompt, this is where the prompt engineering stuff comes in, but you're like, hey, I want to basically, I have a tool that will map sentences or map phrases to MITRE ATT&CK. Can you read this full blog and pull out those sentences for me and then give that back to me? And it's like, yeah. I mean, again, it's not perfect, but it cuts it in half, right? And I mean, like, then that means that what that translates into for processing in sort of a pipeline like that is a reduction in cost, right? I mean, you're cutting your costs in half at that point. So, yeah, I mean, I think that there are just so many opportunities there. And I think it takes, number one, I think you're totally right that it's not going to necessarily replace anybody. I think that it takes a lot of different mindsets. And in cybersecurity, we have obviously tons of different disciplines. I think it takes people in those separate disciplines to really like dig into what's possible in terms of tasks that can be solved and automated in that way. One to kind of go touch on the non-replacement sort of like idea. So I've seen a lot of growth. I mean, everybody's seen a lot of growth within LLMs and within kind of like the healthcare space, and then also the legal space. Mm-hmm. So the idea of like knowledge work type of work being used as sort of like an LLM use case. And if you apply it to like the legal field or the medical field, like, yeah, you're not going to replace a doctor necessarily, right? I mean, you might replace some of the things that they do, like maybe the charting, or like, maybe the clinical documentation, like that stuff, maybe that gets, automated in a certain way. And then maybe they kind of like check off, that everything looks accurate. But you're not going to replace a doctor necessarily, at least anytime soon, in my opinion. And I hope not. Like, I hope that doesn't go away. And then same thing with a lawyer, right? Like you're typically not going to replace a lawyer, because there's such a, that alone would cause such a big, massive ripple effect within the legal system and all that. Like, you still need that human in the loop for a lot of it. to at least like check off to make sure everything looks accurate. So yeah, I think those two spaces, and I really see a lot of comparison between medical, legal, and cybersecurity specifically. Just the different, I mean, they're obviously different domains, but the fact that they each have sort of like specific language, specific structures of language that they use, and terminology and all that. Like, if you kind of like compare what LLMs have been doing in those kind of two spaces, I think cybersecurity could definitely like expand into those types of how LLMs are helping solve those fields. But yeah, I mean, like, we'll see. I don't know. One thing, and I'm sort of going on a rant now, but one thing that I've noticed is that there seems to be so where those in those two fields, there's been a lot of like new startups coming up, and a lot of new ideas in how to use LLMs to solve those problems. I haven't seen a ton of new startups, again, me excluding myself, that have been coming up to solve cybersecurity problems. I've seen a lot of integration of like those co-pilots, like we were talking about, into existing products, but I haven't seen a ton of companies that are springing up that are like, hey, we're solving this cybersecurity issue, like with using LLMs. And I don't know. It's interesting. I'm not quite sure why that is. I mean, I don't know if y'all had any ideas around that, but that's just something that I've been kind of like floating around with some of my other circles to be like, why do y'all think that is? Because like I see a ton of legal stuff, a ton of medical stuff, not so much cybersecurity stuff.
I don't know. Yeah, that's a good question. I'm more just like all the integration co-pilot things. Yeah, my buddy Adam that I mentioned, he went to robust intelligence, and like they're kind of focused on the AI security side. But
Yep.
yeah, I'm not sure. Paul?
Seems new and niche. Like
Yeah.
too many, like, because I think in order to be effective in certain cases, like for certain scenarios, there's a lot of work that goes into it. So you're kind of focused on one problem. And if that problem isn't big enough for everybody to basically, be effective at it, like it's difficult. And then you're going to say, okay, well, I need to solve 10 problems in order to scale out, right? And make this effective, and that is going to grow and sustain. So maybe that's part of it. I don't know enough to really effectively, but it could also be that of like, what is the real problem we're trying to solve? And I think we're seeing a lot of hype train on organizations that have never touched AI, and now all of a sudden in the past 6 months, they're like, we have AI. It's like, any org that does that, I'm very suspicious of, because you didn't have it, but now in 6 months you somehow came out with an amazing product, and that solved a whole bunch of problems that customers have been asking for. Like, to me, that's very suspicious. Now, not to say that some are not legitimate or that they've been just under the radar. Like, that's cool. But it also does seem like there's a hype train of trying to ride this in there. And so I think there's kind of like multiple factors that go into it. Again, I'm not an expert in this area or have enough like
you're an expert. You're an expert in cybersecurity. That's all that matters.
Yeah, I'm an expert in something.
No, I mean, I agree, and I think that's what's hard about. I think that's what's hard about this sort of overlap in the space, right? Of like, number one, I think cybersecurity people in general are obviously a little bit. I don't want to say paranoid, not paranoid, but skeptical, I guess, is what I'm looking for. And rightfully so. I mean, like, I think like you say, there's a lot of things that get published out there that are more marketing than help, right? Or like more marketing than really something new. And again, like you say, not to say that hasn't been going on or things haven't been behind the scenes, but like you haven't really seen it before that. And now a lot of stuff is coming out about it. So, and I mean, that's part of the game. I mean, like that's going to happen all the time. I mean, cybersecurity has those same issues. I mean, like, people writing different FUD and like stuff like that. That's always going to be there. But And I don't know, it's just kind of like an interesting insight that I've been noticing for a while now.
We had a comment, and the one I'm actually like really leaning in on, which is they pointed out that there's potentially 2 points. The first being that there's less public knowledge in InfoSec versus medical or law. If you think about it, that's also fairly true, right? Like there's a lot of shielding of certain information. There's limited release of that. We're trying to not expose as much of it in certain cases. Now, not to say that defensively or offensively we shield it all, but in reality, we do. We shield a good portion of it and release the specific things that we're okay with, whether it's from an OPSEC perspective or we think it's tradecraft or whatever it is. But you think about the medical or law, like that's potentially hundreds of years of 200 years of knowledge, right? Like think about like medical 300 years ago, like InfoSec didn't exist 300 years ago.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think there's a lot more. And also those fields are more public, right? Like the research is there. You go look at basically anything like from lawsuits for a majority of stuff is public domain. You can go request it if you know how to go look for it and ask for it. And in some cases just pay for the $10 or whatever to get the documents. So I think that's also a good part of it. And then the other part, just, more problems are new and novel. And so again, I think there's specific niche aspects to that impact it as well.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. I think that there is though still, and kind of when I say like in terms of like the knowledge that's out there for cybersecurity, I don't necessarily mean only like threat focused stuff. Like obviously there's going to be all kinds of stuff about like threat modeling in software development and like stuff like that. So that's, there is still quite a bit, but totally agree that there's obviously InfoSec's only been around for 20 years. I mean, like, let's be real, like in a real sort of sense, like, I mean, obviously there's been research going back to the 50s about talking about what computers can or cannot do. But like, it's obviously a very new field. So there's not going to be nearly as much knowledge out there about it. But I do think that there is still quite a bit, right? And I mean, like, that's something that, every day we get 5 to 10 new blogs about some threat or a new CVE or a new POC or something, there's too much information that's out there for one small team to kind of like consume and actually action in a day. And I think that's a problem, right? And it's not a new problem. That's obviously been around for a long time. But yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting. I like that point though. I like the fact that those two fields have obviously been around for a really long time, and have a lot of like public knowledge about it. But yeah.
And I think it's perspective too, right? Like when the information comes out, it's not all of it, right? When something comes out in the medical or legal field, there's probably dozens and hundreds over time that evolve it. There's no like secrecy in it. There's no like tradecraft per se in those. Like, that's not the business model, right? So it's more open in that sense of when things get published, at least in like how I'm thinking and trying to like wrap my head around it. Versus like OPSEC, like when we talk about a threat actor or a group in a blog post, whether there's 10 of them, it's only a specific subset of information.
Sure.
Like rarely does a whole entire thing about a specific group ever just wind up, and then the same across 5, 6, 7 orgs or researchers that drop it. So it's always like a fraction of that whole story. Which I think also paints a picture into some of that.
Yeah, no,
I should say.
And I think that's probably why you see these co-pilots that are being integrated into the product specifically, right? So like Microsoft Security Copilot, they're going to be able to integrate with all their threat intel, with all their internal threat intel, and like all the stuff that they don't publish publicly, right? But then can also integrate with your SIM, right? Or like whatever you're using. If you're using Sentinel or like any of that stuff, you're going to be able to integrate with that, right? So I mean that makes total sense.
I think it's an interesting thing. Is like from a vendor side, it makes sense. Like think of all of the things. If you were a Microsoft customer, all of the buttons, all of the potential you could do, a majority of orgs probably scratch the surface of it.
Mhm.
And so I think that's where Copilot can help out in those cases, right? You think of like the CrowdStrikes and all their different platforms, or the Palos, right? Like there's so much to it. Even when you spend your day doing it in and out 8, 9, 10 hours a day for years, you scratch like fractions of it. Like Mike's been at Splunk for how long? And I'm sure there's probably new stuff in Splunk that he's never touched before. But a Copilot could help in that capacity of exploring those different options, or things that are just like, oh, hey, that's new. I didn't know. When did that come out, right? Like, how many times have you come across something you're like, how long has this been here?
Yeah. Yeah. Even today when I shipped a tweet on the Confluence stuff in Splunk, I don't write regex every day. So I was just like, here's a couple things I need to extract. Go and do it. And GPT just pumped out the recs and we called it good.
Even when I do, I forget everything I've ever known about regex and why
Yeah,
I just
I would be scared for your mental health if you were writing regex every single day. That'd be a nightmare.
it's almost like coding in Lua every day.
Oh god.
Oh man, Lua.
Where's the LLMs for Lua?
I mean, see,
The thing is LLMs are written in Lua.
Right there.
Okay. Maybe they are. Maybe they are Lua.
Well, we only got a few minutes left. I think we forgot that we also have a demo, right? Do we have a demo?
Oh yeah.
Oh, do you have?
Yeah, I can show this up real quick. Let's see.
Because I think this is interesting. Because I think one of the problems that at least I've come across with threat reports is that I think most people consume it and they see the table of TTPs at the end, but it means absolutely nothing about like what's inside of it, and you have to go extract like, oh, they used WMIC. Like, well, how did they use WMIC? Like, what aspect of it, right? As an example. So I think this is an interesting idea to help kind of expand that, kind of demystify some of it and speed up your consumption of your smash and grab approach.
Exactly. Yeah. Okay. Can y'all see that? I can't tell.
Yep, you're good.
Yeah,
we have it.
Cool. Yeah. No, I totally agree. And I mean, like I love the smash and grab kind of like idea, because that's pretty much what this is, right? So like, again, I'm not gonna try and sell this. I just think that this is like a good sort of like definitive use case for what LLMs can do in cybersecurity, right? So again, basically, this is like the front end of the product that this is like going to be released soon. But basically, you have like your MITRE ATT&CK set up. You've got all your tactics here, and then you've got like your techniques here too, right? So you've got all those descriptions, basically what attack is, today, and then you've got all those different procedural examples that you see there. But then you've also got the kind of like AI generated type stuff, right? So this is where my product comes in, and basically, right now, how I have it set up is there's a pipeline, basically, maybe like 15 or so, like kind of like trusted sources, different, like FortiGuard and CrowdStrike, all the different threat intel vendors. Basically, that's all being piped in, processed, and then fed into kind of like this sort of a layout. So that basically you get like a real-time, up-to-date MITRE ATT&CK. Because MITRE ATT&CK's great, and like obviously it's a great resource and always has been, or not always, but it has been a great resource for a long time. But one of the unfortunate things is that it's very like intensive to do. It requires a whole lot to update it, and I think right now they're only doing like biannual releases. And so, yeah, that's kind of like one downside, is that like you might want something that, was in the blog from last week. And this is kind of like a way to do that. So yeah, I mean, like just very briefly, like that's just kind of like what this is. One of the examples I think that I had here, there was one example that I had that, of course, I'm not going to be able to find now, where basically like MITRE didn't have specific examples of the procedure, but this stuff did. Yeah. Anyways, so like here's just one example of like, okay, they like MITRE specifically published one sort of like procedural example for this technique. Great. But then here's like a whole bunch of other ones. If you wanted to dig into it, find more examples, whether you're doing a report, or like you're just like doing some research kind of thing, like this could be helpful for you. But yeah, so that's kind of like the front end very briefly.
That's cool. Yeah, I definitely could see it saving a lot of time and just trying to get things organized.
Yeah, and like there's going to be also a kind of like a global query feature that's going to be on a different page. That's basically like, you know, I wouldn't say like an advanced query, but like you can search across basically everything and then like narrow down your search to like specific date ranges or, you know, specific keywords kind of thing. If you're looking for, I don't know, anything that mentions Octotempest, right? And like, just pull that down and get all the procedure examples for those.
That's interesting. So I think that's also one of the things is like, when was the last time this was used? I think that's sometimes missed potentially, and it's not always clear of like, okay, we saw this, but it was 7 months ago.
Yeah.
So I think that's also an interesting aspect of like, when's the last time it was seen? When was it published? Kind of doing that correlation of being able to group and say like, okay, maybe the last 3 months of known reporting from trusted sources to do that. It's an interesting aspect to it as well.
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of one of the goals, because like again, that was one of those things that I would be doing as a threat intel analyst that I do throughout my entire career is like, all right, we need, you know, we want to see where, you know, this is a new threat actor, right? We want to see where all the different techniques that they've used over time, or maybe within, like you say, a specific 3-month period of time of reporting, that kind of thing. So hopefully this helps somebody. And I, you know, it's helped me even for just random things, right? Like if people are asking me questions and I'm like, hey, let me just see if we've got something in the database kind of thing. And yeah, so yeah, very briefly, I think that's like a very, and it has dark mode too. I mean, it's got to have dark mode. If it doesn't have dark mode, it's not real. But yeah, just like a very brief, like just intro to that.
That's cool.
Yeah,
and you have an API as well, like people can.
So the API is, you know, obviously this is all based on the API. It all processes through the API. The front end is basically a way to interact with the stuff that gets saved, like in the database. The API is if you want to run your own stuff. So like you can even run like local stuff, right? So you can submit URLs, you can submit images, and PDFs, like that are all, you know, hosted on the internet, or you can submit all those things locally, and we don't save any of that or anything like that. That's just all, you know, that's all your stuff. I don't want anything to do with it. But if you want to process it, you know, you can it basically uploads the API, processes it, deletes that file off because I don't want it, and then gives you back the outputs and goes from there. So yeah,
cool.
It's a nice little image. And I mean, just to kind of nerd out on the product a little bit, I know we're right at time, but I think the image thing is really cool. I was actually pretty proud of doing the image stuff because the image processing of like getting an OCR program to work correctly for like images of scripts or images of, you know, I don't know, an IDA screenshot or something like that, has always been a massive sticking point for me throughout, you know, my career. So like, again, using an LLM or, you know, like with GPT-4's vision capabilities now, it's a awesome OCR tool. If you want to use that. Oh, sorry, Paul.
I think he had to drop. He's good.
But yeah, so if you want to use, if you're looking for an OCR tool, definitely try out the vision stuff for GPT-4. And yeah,
that's cool.
Yep.
Yeah, I think it was like a year ago. There was a blog that came out about like some new PowerShell downloader thing or something, and in the blog was just a bunch of screenshots, and I was kind of mad. I was like, what kind of crap blog doesn't give samples? They just give you half screenshots, you know? And I'm like, this is so stupid.
Yeah.
And so I just threw the blog away. And then I came back. I was like, you know what? This is a chat GPT fix.
Yeah.
And so I had GPT rewrite the whole thing and just throw it all together and make it work. So I thought, I mean, again, as a defender, that's a really cool way to go and like use these tools. And that's one more thing I love about them is
Yeah.
like, I'm not going to sit here and hand type everything. It's like,
Yeah, no. And I mean, like, why would you? I mean, like, let's use the technology that we have to like make our lives easier. That's kind of like the really core aspect of what I want this company that I'm working on right now. Like, that's what I want us to do. So like, how can we make, because I know how hard it is, like, and I know how much time none of us have. So like, let's just make it easier. Why not?
yeah, I know. It's funny. Make security easier.
Yeah. So anyways, yeah, I don't know. I mean, we're at an hour, so I don't know. You tell me. I'm happy to go longer, or we can cut it.
Yeah, I think that's kind of it. We just have our typical OST drop and our Atomic Friday drop at the end with these. It's like the boy band.
Yeah, it's like the boy hacker band.
Yeah. But yeah, thank you so much, Harrison. I appreciate you coming and dropping this on us. It's cool. Good info and lots of comments today, which is great. So if anybody has any other questions, feel free to shoot them in and we'll pass them to Harrison.
I have not seen any comments. So
oh, well, that's good.
I didn't know where I should. Am I supposed to be looking somewhere? I don't see anything on my screen, but
no, it's probably hidden.
Yeah. If you have any questions for me specifically, shoot me an email, harrison@zeroshot.io. And yeah, check out the website. I think it's linked in here somewhere, but hit me up on LinkedIn, wherever, if you have any questions or if you want to talk. I'm around.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
We'll see you next March.
Yeah. Hopefully sooner than that.
Yes, definitely. Awesome. Thank you again. Talk to y'all later.
Thanks. Bye.
See ya.